So now we'll be heading towards the second event of today's evening. Dear friends, the long prevailing implicit bias in the society at workplace couldn't stop the success journey of women in STEM. What our WIE chair Shudeshna Chaudhary, she mentioned that this year we started a talk series, Dare to Dream. So in continuation to that, today in this particular event, we'll be having that WIE Plenary invited talk on life as an IITian, an academician, and a businesswoman. So today we'll be having our speaker, esteemed speaker, Dr. ParvatiDev. I request Professor Shushmita Shurkole to chair this session. Dr. Shushmita Shurkole is a professor and head of the Advanced Computing and Microelectronics Unit in the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, India. He was the professor in charge of the Computer and Communication Sciences Division till 2018. Her research contributions are in the areas of algorithms for design, automation of secure electronic systems, and reliable quantum computers. She is a fellow of INAE, IETE, IEI, and a senior member of IEEE. Among other awards, she was the recipient of the President of India Gold Medal at IIT Kharagpur, IBM Faculty Award, and Distinguished Alumnus Award of IIT Kharagpur. So now I request Professor Shushmita Shurkole to come in and just conduct the session. Shushmita Di, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Shudipta, and thank you for the kind introduction, a long one. So we've been running a bit late, and all of us are, at least I am, eagerly waiting to hear from Dr. Parvati Dev. Parvati Dev has been my role model because she was a senior to me in IIT Kharagpur. Of course, we did not have any interaction, but overlap. But all my professors used to cite her as a role model to me. That Parvati was one of the brightest students we've come up. So Dr. Parvati Dev was a graduate of Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and then she went on to get her PhD from Stanford University with postdoctoral research at MIT and in the Silicon Valley. She is also a fellow of ACMI, and currently she's the CEO of SimTabs LLC. It was a stint in industry that showed her that she could build products that changed how a physician or surgeon performed their task. Her research and products pioneered work in neural nets, 3D medical imaging, educational hypermedia, and hospital simulations. Today, her health team spaces, virtual hospitals, provide spaces for nurses, doctors, pharmacists, and therapists to practice together, learning in the safety of a simulation, correcting personal and team errors, and emerging with confidence in their ability to help real patients. A really appropriate Dare to Dream talk. Parvati, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sushmita, and thank you to WIE. I believe I should share my screen now. Is that correct? Thank you very much. I'm honored to present this WIE plenary talk. It is a true honor. And Dr. Shurkole, thank you again for inviting me. As you know, I've been an IITian, and that has been a transformative part of my life. I've also been in industry and academia and back and forth. And through these, I've really grown and seen a lot. So what gave me success in all these attempts? And what really stands out, there are many, many reasons, but what really stands out to me is I did not hesitate. I was always ready to catch opportunities, what I call to catch the tiger by the tail. And I think that this is where we all have to be ready to see what's possible and what we can do. Now, what makes us ready for this? And why do I think that women in particular, everybody actually, but women in particular, need to think that there are opportunities. Don't worry about being given things. There are opportunities. I need to grab them. In order to do this, the first thing I feel is you really have to be ready. You have to realize that as life changes, as the world changes, as technology changes all around you, there are lots of things ready for you to do. But to be ready, you have to prepare your mind, which means you have to be learning about things, you have to be curious, you have to look around you and build a framework of knowledge so that when an opportunity is passing by, it fits into your framework and you can see, aha, this is what I would like to do. The second part of it is, what excites you? To find an opportunity that suits you, you need something that really fits your passion. So think about what you really love to do. Do what you need to do, but think about what excites you. Something that we were talking about in the previous panel, and I can't emphasize enough, your network is critical. Don't be afraid to ask for help, advice, guidance. People don't give you mentors. Mentors just don't say, I want to be your mentor. It is through talking with people and asking questions that you find your mentors. And when you find your mentors, also turn around and be a mentor. Offer help. That the people you help will also become your network. And don't accept barriers. They exist. They definitely exist. Go around them. Go over them. If you have to, you fight them. But generally, I personally have found, for me, they don't exist. I just move. A little bit about me, really quickly. As a kid, my family traveled a lot, all over, and consequently, we became very close as a family, more than oriented to our settled community. Engineering was at IIT, wonderful years, very important years. As an academician, as a research, in my PhD life, in my postdoc life as faculty, the area that I discovered I had a real passion for was neuroscience. I would say more particularly the application of technology to understanding the brain. And I continued that passion for the application of technology to the human being through my rest of my professional life in medical imaging, learning methods in medicine. I have a family with 2 daughters. They're out working. And I do spend a lot of time also volunteering, both for IIT and other places. So, the old photograph from when we were kids. But as a child, I was in a location where the only girls' school available was a convent that taught arts. And consequently, I did history, geography, French, English language, domestic science. I didn't do any science. And when I finished senior Cambridge, we had 3 free months. So my mother, thinking it might be good for me, put me into a boys' school nearby. She figured I was old enough to deal with it. And I sat in every science class, so 4 different levels of science, all at the same time, physics, chemistry, and I got totally confused. But I do remember that I loved the labs. I loved seeing magnetic filings becoming a pattern when you put a magnet on them, or seeing that you put light into a prism and it comes out as a rainbow. The labs taught me that science is something that shows you that the world works according to some method. And that was a revelation. We came back to India, we went to Delhi, and no college would take me. I was too young. My mother, who had friends, she's Bengali, she had relatives in Kolkata, and she took me there and she met with the head of Lady Brabourne College, which was a very Parda college at that time, and persuaded her to take me on as an unofficial student because having done senior Cambridge, I could not do pre-university. But she put me into science in pre-university, and I did physics, chemistry, math, and biology. And where I stayed, many of you who live in Calcutta will know this extension hostel here, because I came a bit too late to be in the main hostel. And my room up there, that was a balcony, and we all spent pretty much most of our time hanging out this balcony, people watching, and doing adda. So I'm afraid I wasn't a very good student at that time, but studies did come easily. When the course finished and I went home to Delhi for the study break before pre-university, nothing to do. So I studied and I caught up. The study break is long enough. And I did well in pre-university. Even more importantly, because I studied, I did well in the IIT exam. However, I did want to stop and say one thing. Up to this point, I really was floating, but not seizing any opportunities. The people who seized the opportunity were my parents, who thought maybe she should try science. And that actually opened up so much to me. Now, after that, I went to IIT. It was, I have to say, a purely random occurrence. At Lady Braben, my roommates, one wanted to go to medicine, one wanted to study chemistry. They all had plans. I had no plan. So somebody showed me an ad in a newspaper for this engineering college called Indian Institute of Technology. I'd never heard of it. And in that ad, there was a word, electronics. And that was a word that had been discussed at home as something interesting. And I didn't know what it was. Didn't matter. Thought this is more interesting than doing medicine or chemistry. I'm going to apply to this place. And I have to say, it was a very uninformed opportunity that I seized. But I did apply. I did well. Just as a funny side note, I had to bunk classes to fill out the application, take it to the General Post Office and submit it. No time to tell my parents. When I went back home, told them, no comment from them, but they were very kind enough to go and get me some sample exams. And I sat at home and worked them out, and it was useful. And I did well, and I was in the first 100 in the list. It is a little surprising that after a few months of studying science, I was able to do that. So I think I was very ready for this area, and that's why it worked for me. IIT was a real revelation. First of all, as you all know, it is far away from any main city. And at that time, it was really far away because it was so hard to travel. Even the local town of Kharagpur, there was quite a distance between the IIT campus and Kharagpur. You didn't just stroll out. These are the boys' hostels. This is the women's hostel, Sarojini Naidu. And it was a really nice hostel, I have to say. Each of us had our own room. We had activities. We chatted. We had a lovely lawn. I think these things have all kind of become less now, but in our time, it was really a nice place. And we had many, many activities. Because we were so far from town, we had to make our own life. We were like a city in itself. So this one is a UN debate that we are doing in the auditorium. We had plays, we had music, we had student government. We governed ourselves completely. We had elections. The professors had a very light touch on us. And sports, and the girls participated in everything, even if we were fairly secluded in our hostel. The people we met there, both boys and girls, became my family, and they still are. I'm very, very close to many of them, more close than I am to many of my cousins. However, the difficulty came during studies. This is the IIT library at that time. It was a gorgeous place, and it was a wealth of resources. I spent many, many hours there. And as I mentioned to you, curiosity was one of my besetting sins, perhaps. I read as much as I could. However, because typically we were one girl in a class of boys, you went back to the hostel and you had to do your homework by yourself. There was no group study, no support from your classmates. You couldn't ask questions just very casually. You had to set up meetings. And certainly no rumors about what was going to be in this test and that test. So all of us really had to succeed on our own. It says a lot for our strength that we did. The professors there, many of them were wonderful people. First of all, our director, Dr. S.R. Sengupta, he was very supportive of women. And among the many professors, I'd like to mention Professor Sanyal, initially one of our professors, and then the head of the department. And been my supporter through the decades. We finished IIT. I had a wonderful time. I had a great social time, but I did not use my network, or I did not have a professional network when I was at IIT. I had no clue what I was to do next. And certainly, I never thought to really find out what the boys were going to do professionally, how they were getting interviews, how they were getting jobs. So I did send off a few applications to some US universities and asking for admission and financial aid. I got messages back. A few of them gave me admission, but no financial aid. And my classmates did much better. People who were not doing as well as me in class were getting all these assistantships. It was a really down time for me. One of my friends says, "It's all right, just read the Statesman, read the classifieds, and then read a good book and just wait and see what happens." And I really had no better idea than that. My parents did have a better idea at that time, and it wasn't getting me married off, though there were some offers. When I got off the Howrah Express in Delhi, before I could even get off, my father said, "Hurry, hurry. You have only 4 weeks. You're going to America." And I was so shocked. And it turned out that one of the universities, University of California, Santa Barbara, was having a summer program to teach foreign students English language and American history. And they had given me a full 2-month tuition, board, and lodging for this summer school. And I told my father, "I know English. In fact, I know it pretty well." He said, "That's all right. It's an opportunity. Go." And he got a small government education loan for me, and he tossed me over the ocean. Thank goodness it all worked. I got assistantships both at UC Santa Barbara and at Stanford University, and I joined Stanford University. Again, not just my years there as a student doing my master's and my PhD in electrical engineering, but many, many further engagements with Stanford. I was back and forth, in and out, multiple times. But let me just move on and talk about what happened as a result of all of that experience. While at IIT and while at Stanford, one of the things that I discovered was that I did have a passion for something. I was not clueless. And the thing that I found I really cared about was the human brain. The human brain as something that worked, as something that I could try to understand its working. And this was both, I should mention, because of an article that I came across, an IEEE magazine in IIT, that had an article on cybernetics, new word, but it was an article that talked about how we could look at the human, at biology, and understand it as a working system. That is maybe a common idea now, but in the 1960s, it was only a few scientists thought that way, not other people. The body was the body, the brain was the brain, it was all miraculous. And then that article said, no, we can understand how the bee's eye sees. We can understand some things about the brain. And then when I came to Stanford, there was a professor who was actually studying cybernetics, and he had published a book called Brains, Machines, and Mathematics. As soon as I found out about him, I just transferred from semiconductors and systems theory to work with him. And it was a great move, but it also had its difficulty. It was such a new area that I had real problems. But that was the first passion I had. The second one, just to give you an advance notice, I then later on learned how to look inside humans using imaging. I learned that we could use technology to amplify learning, particularly media. And I learned how to use technology to work with hospitals and improve healthcare quality. I talk about these things in different terms. Firstly, what the world was like when I got into the area, how I got into the area, where I think I made a difference, and maybe some stories. So first of all, understanding humans and understanding the brain through the concept of neural nets. Even while I was doing my PhD, I joined a think tank in Boston. I moved to Boston and started working with this group that at that time was trying to create the concept of neuroscience. There were no neuroscientists at that time. There were chemists, biologists, physicists, biophysicists, but no really neuroscience. It was just emerging. And this group would put together workshops of selected scientists from around the world to talk about a topic that they wanted to become one of the frontiers of this new science. And 6 times a year, they would bring people together and they would publish these booklets, sometimes books. And these became the Bible of this new field. It was my PhD advisor, Michael Arbib, who suggested I join this group while doing my PhD. And the group was led by a biochemist, a famous biochemist, Dr. Francis Schmidt. We attended these workshops, and it was like sparks would fly. Ideas would fly across these rooms. The people in the rooms were stars in their own fields. Many of them were Nobel laureates. And so literally the level of discussion was so exciting and so high, you couldn't but be moved to another plane of thinking. This one here is a very low resolution photograph of one of these workshops that I want to mention. It was a workshop on pain. And maybe you can see me. I'm this short person here in my sari. I wore a sari throughout my professional career, which was actually a calculated move on my part. First, I had no money. I couldn't buy Western clothes for many, many years. And once people got accustomed to seeing me in saris, I figured that's what they knew me as. So I just continued wearing saris for the next 50 years. This is Dr. Schmidt, and this is Saul Snyder, a biochemist from Johns Hopkins, who convened this workshop. And they were discussing these ideas about pain, how medications worked, how the neural systems might be inhibited to stop pain, and electrical methods to do this. But they really didn't come up with good, tight questions until this young scientist from Glasgow stood up and he said, I've been doing experiments where I've been using opium, which was one of the pain medications available to people, on mice. And then when I take their brains and I break out the membranes, I find opium attached to the membrane. And when I break the membrane down further, I find opium attached to molecules. And the room exploded. It was such a novel idea that a substance from the outside had a natural place to attach in the brain. And that natural way of some medicine that had to do with pain could actually connecting the brain must be how that medicine worked on stopping pain. That concept did not exist. It completely changed how people thought about the brain, and it changed the world of pain medicine. So that exciting workshop made me think about how I could use some of these ideas. And one of the workshops we had was on vision, and somebody presented the concept of disparity. Now, this is how we humans see depth. If these are the two eyes, left eye, right eye, and you have something that's close by, this is somebody's finger, and that is a distant tree. What happens in the eye, this eye is now, let's say, looking somewhere between the two. The tree falls on this side of this eye and the finger falls on that side, but in the other eye, they're reversed. So it's as though the two images, it's as though the two objects have slid in different directions. And somehow the brain must be able to detect the fact that these images are different and get depth out of it. Now, you're familiar with these red-blue diagrams. These are called random dot stereograms. And they were invented by a person called Bela Ulis. And he was at that meeting. And he showed that if you have these glasses with red and green filters, he could make you see 3 dimensions inside there. It would just emerge out of this random dots. And the way he did it was, and I have to show you a little demonstration. It's the only way I can explain it to you. So in this example, there is a square hiding inside that mess of dots. So what he would do is he would take a blank area and he would put a pattern of dots on them with, let me see if I can put this straight, whoops. Yeah, with a square in front of it. And he would move the square to one side. The dots are on both of them. And he would take a photo, and he'd move the square to the other side, and he would take a photo. And so in this, and these are the two images. And he did these mathematically, but that's the concept. And in these two pictures, the center part, the dots are moved. Of course, we cannot tell looking at this because it looks so random. But I hypothesized that if the brain was actually picking out these sideways movements, then because we knew that there were neurons that could see dots, that could see lines, that could see edges, we already knew that at that time, that maybe there were neurons that could see disparity. And I put together a mathematical simulation with different layers of neurons where I made these neurons as small computing units, an array of parallel computing units. So these are like small parallel computers. And the only thing they could compute was, am I seeing a disparity of 0? In this array, am I seeing a disparity of 1, a disparity of 2, and so on? And if the image was set up so that the surround had a disparity of 0 and the center had a disparity of, let's say, 4, then this array and that array would really light up in the locations where they got the matching input. And there might be some matches in all the other arrays because some dots were bound to have, even though they're the wrong dots, they still match up as disparity of 1 or 2. But I added a second feature that said, if a neuron, am lit up, I am going to excite the people next to me. I'm going to enhance their activity. And having enhanced their activity, they will increase in activity. Consequently, if there are a number of parallel units next to each other, all lit up, they're going to make themselves strong and bright. And the second part was, if they were not near each other, if the excited units, they did not get any enhancement, but all the other layers would be trying to suppress them. So the noise would get suppressed and the real activity would get enhanced. And I was able to show by simulation, a lot of it was hand simulation. Again, the computer literally did this entire simulator on a Wang calculator because I didn't have an access to a computer. I showed that I could extract a square from a mess of random dots. And I published that as part of my PhD thesis about how a neural model, a model of parallel neurons, could extract depth. I published in a fairly obscure journal. It was whatever my professor said, there is an opportunity here, you want to submit. It was a mistake both on his part and mine. But anyway, it was seen by somebody else who was a lot more famous than me, who took the idea, modified it a little bit, and republished it without giving me any credit for having originally published and got this idea. And it caused quite a TV soap opera. And between my professor and this person, the resulting good thing for me was my paper got publicized. And even though that fight went on, some people who actually went on to do really good work and make neural nets into what it is today, machine learning and deep learning, actually saw my paper, talked with me. And so I can lay some claim to 40 years earlier, having helped start this field. I personally actually moved on. My interest was in many other things. And my husband got a job in Silicon Valley, California. And I left my faculty position. Some of you were talking about that. And the good thing was Silicon Valley was heaven for someone interested in technology. It was literally one of the most exciting places you could go to at that time. And I didn't have a job. So I met some people and I got a temporary research position in the rehabilitation engineering lab for paralyzed veterans through Professor Larry Leifer, who was a professor at Stanford, who later on actually became very well known as the person who pioneered design engineering and design thinking. And the only instruction he gave me was do something interesting. Okay. I was in a hospital with a lot of veterans, and there were many things that interested me, many opportunities, many potential tigers. And I did do a variety of things. But the thing that really did grab me was three-dimensional graphics and imaging that was just becoming available. And one of the people who really got me into this was Professor Robert Chase, from Stanford University. He was head of anatomy and head of hand surgery. And because I was working with paralyzed veterans, those who were paralyzed from the neck down, they really didn't have much control of their limbs, leave alone hands. And I was interested in working with them to help them understand and improve how the hand moved and how fingers moved mathematically. And to do that, I needed measurements of segment lengths, moment arms, the typical mechanics things. And I went to this person who I did not know, Professor Chase, and told him my issues. And he said, oh, okay, I will cut slices through the wrist of a cadaver for you, give them to you, and you can make your measurements. And that was just a gift. I had in the lab, I had a plotter, a digitizer. Professor Leifer said, well, I think you need to look at these things. He bought me a graphic system. In those days, that was a huge deal. And the graphic system, you had to program each pixel. There were no commands for graphic systems. And I got some software for free from Utah that, if I had outlines, would generate a three-dimensional object. And with that, I got the photographs enlarged. I put them on the plotter. I digitized them. I didn't have a good way of digitizing, so things like this is actually a photograph of it's a much later picture. But I was looking for outlines, and I wanted to end up with a 3D object. These photos are from a much later time, so they're not what I had, but I have no photos from that time. But I needed somebody to help me do these outlines. And Dr. Chase sent over one of the visiting faculty from Shanghai, Dr. Suo Wan-Chen. And Dr. Suo was an anatomist, and she and I got together and we sat and outlined the structures on those enlarged photos using digitizer. And from that came my simulator, came some publications. She returned to Shanghai, but we were in touch after that. She came many times again, and I visited her. And she developed her 3D labs and pushed 3D in China, which, again, I have to say, was part of because she was in our lab. I want to take a short break here and just talk about networks. Because as you've already seen, I keep mentioning people. And I found that my entire career happened because I talked with people, because I told them what I wanted to do. I asked if they could help me. I was ready to accept their help. They got to know what I wanted and what I wanted to do, and they told other people. And that network grew. And I also found later that giving help was just as important. A younger person, a person who needs advice, a person who's just looking for information. Because these people also get to know you and what you do, and they go out and talk about you. And they turn around and they see something interesting, they come and tell you. These networks made my career. And for women especially, who really hesitate to talk about themselves, this kind of network is essential. So don't hesitate to ask for help and to give help. So with that background in 3D, and through a referral by Dr. Chase, I moved very reluctantly into industry. I was scared. I was only accustomed to being a researcher. I didn't think I could do anything else. But it was a whole new world, and one that really made me grow. So what happened? Just a note. This actually came about a couple of years later. One of the people I worked with, Dr. Joseph McCarthy in New York, when he was asked what the biggest advance was in his professional lifetime as a surgeon, he said it has to be imaging, the ability to see inside the human body. X-rays had existed, and you could see inside, but CT scans had just come into being. And then when we came in and added 3D to that, you could literally see inside the body. And I got into this because Dr. Chase referred me to this person, another young surgeon, David White, who was a plastic surgeon just starting his career. And he used to try to reconstruct heads, scalps, foreheads, cheekbones that had broken through trauma, shattered, or maybe lost to a tumor. And he would take pieces of bone from elsewhere and shape them into the right pattern. And he had this thought that if he could use this new technology of CT scans and actually, if there was if this bone here was shattered, if he could take the image on this side, reflect it over, and design what his piece should look like before he went into surgery, that he would do a better job. And so he actually got a patent and started a company. And Dr. Chase told him, hey, I know somebody who can actually help you do that. And that's how I met David White. I joined the company and we built the CMAX 1000. We got CT scans. I hope you're able to see this whole image. It's not covered by the photos of the videos. But anyway, we in CT scans, the bone shines brightest. The air is dark because X-rays go right through it, so they don't image anything, but they bounce off of bones. So bone shines bright. Soft tissues are a little gray. Fat, by the way, is even more, absorbs X-rays less. And therefore, you can, by finding the right intensity threshold, you can actually extract the bone. Then you can have the computer work on it and find the outline. These are the outlines you get. This is the outline between air and tissue. So we get the face, we can get the bones. And as a result, you can get a 3D of a person. And the computers at that time were huge, but very limited. We were doing our work on a tiny one called a PDP 1123. The graphics itself had its own computer. So the two computers had to talk to each other. And the data came to us on magnetic tape from the CT scanner. We put the whole thing together into this double-barreled machine that we would sell. And the initial algorithms, which worked on slices that were just 256 by 256 pixels in resolution, the computer could only take the first two lines and find the bone, and then put that out and take the next two lines and continue finding the bone. And the algorithms had to deal with this very complicated, difficult system. Very soon, computers were advancing by leaps and bounds at that time. In a couple of years, actually, we were able to load the whole slice. But we started with that very difficult situation. And we created a system that we sold, which could look at the human body, in this case, the skull in 3D. You could see that defect. This person had a tumor. A lot of the bone got eroded. We reflected from the other side. We created an editing system to help design this piece. We had a numerically controlled milling machine that made molds of this piece from the computer design. We cast it in a plastic and then sent it off to make a silicone piece, which was biocompatible. And the surgeon could either put the biocompatible piece in and use it as is, or they could replace it with bone. And this actually worked. It started being used. So my fun project at the VA Veterans Hospital became a product that went out and was used by surgeons for their surgery, and funnily enough, by radiologists who can see very well in 3D themselves, but used it to communicate to other physicians and patients. I want to tell you a quick story on the side about Steve Jobs. I met him once, and he's a Silicon Valley personality, and we happened to be funded by Philips Medical System. Our company was doing very badly at that time, so we got investment from Philips Medical Systems, and they had invested in Steve Jobs' company, Pixar. And so they wanted us to use Pixar's technology. At that time, they had a beautiful rendering algorithm, but it ran on this enormous machine. And so we designed an entire computing system to sell that would do this. And Jobs did not like our machine because it had mag tape. And he said, you got to connect it directly to the scanner. It has to be all electronic, direct connection. There were only two networks at that time, an IBM proprietary and an Apple proprietary. And we told them, there's no way that the hospital IT is going to let you connect that scanner to our machine. He did not like it. He did not like us. He went off. And that photo shows you exactly how he looked. With like, I'm very suspicious of all of you. It was just a very fun side story I wanted to pass on to you. But the business of medical imaging was changing. And from a pay-for-service industry where they paid you for whatever service the doctor performed, it became a system where they decided beforehand what each procedure and test was going to cost. And that was all they would reimburse you for. So any new technology that added the cost would not get reimbursed. So our business changed from a cost increasing technology to a cost efficiency technology, which meant that we moved from being a 3D company to being a company that pulled images together, put them out on photographic film, and returned the film and maybe a few 3D images to the requester. And eventually we were bought by Kodak, on whose film our stuff would go out. That was just way too dull for me. So I left the company and I started playing with some other new technologies. HyperCard had recently come out. Interactive media was just starting. And I made some of my own interactive lessons using 3D and anatomy. And I pressed them on a CD-ROM, which to make one CD-ROM in those days cost $600. I got that CD-ROM pressed, but it was really good that I did that because it opened doors for me. And one of those was that I was able to bring interactive media into the medical school world. Dr. Chase again invited me back into Stanford to help run a group that he had recently started. And it was a group of all these young people. They're medical students and computer science students, and they needed somebody to do what Dr. Chase wanted, which was get these 3D stereo imagery into use in anatomy. I told him that if I could spread it across the entire medical school, not just anatomy, I would join. And he agreed. And I was at Stanford for the next 18 years. We did many projects. One of them, Brainstorm, was something that actually spread pretty much around the world to various medical schools. And because it allowed students in an interactive way to learn the way they wanted to learn, which is different from the way classes are taught. They had to go to the courses because that gave you the basic knowledge. But once they got the knowledge, they wanted to learn going back and forth. And interactive media allowed them to do that. So we realized that what we were doing was something different from pure research. We were not creating new knowledge. We were creating new learning experiences. And to do that, we had to bring in faculty from around the medical school. So we actively promoted our work, had workshops, open houses, visitors. The medical newspaper wrote us up. Soon we were working with every course in the medical school. And our lab grew and our collaborators grew. So in this photograph, some years later, half the people there, more than half, are our collaborators. And just a few are the core lab team. And we had a lot of visitors, and we became the showpiece of the medical school. They would send visitors to visit us. I mean, one year we had 100 different sets of visitors. You can imagine a lab receiving 100 sets. So we did very well. However, there's always a story. One of these visitors was a tycoon from Hong Kong who had brought his office with him because the medical school was working with him to send surgeons there and help him develop his new medical school in China, just outside of Hong Kong. They saw what we were doing and he offered to buy it. All of our output, and the medical school didn't like that. Essentially, we were too successful. And I could see the writing on the wall. Funding started decreasing from the school. We had a lot of grants, but the grants could not be sustained without the technology base that the medical school provided. And I realized what my issue was. I had failed to communicate upwards. I had failed to show my management, how what we were doing was actually benefiting them and that they were our partners. Instead, we just looked very great and they were just giving us some money. The money decreased and consequently we were not able to continue. I placed all our people. We had a great party, and we left. I left. I moved. I always wanted to create my own company. I did. So I created 2 companies, Innovation in Learning and SimTabs. I partnered with a gynecologic surgeon and with a small graphics company, interactive graphics company from Mumbai called INDICON, with whom I still work now. And we went off, and I like to say we changed the world. We brought virtual simulations to the medical world. Our first simulation was a really ambitious, complete reconstruction of an operating room where everything worked. And each of these people in the world, virtual world, was controlled by a different person in the real world. So 5 different people could log in from 5 different places and be together, work together, and treat a patient together. And if this person chose to pick up the defibrillator paddles and give a shock to this virtual patient, the patient's heart would restart. Physiological mathematical model. So this patient is a mathematical visualization, and all the other people are run by real people. And like that, we developed a lot of different products, a lot of different contracts. How to revive a baby, how to prepare a surgical tray, how to manage emergencies. And we provided editing systems to create the content for these various simulations. Our most successful one was, again, an operating room simulation. This was for anesthesiologists. Literally everything worked. This was requested by the Society for Anesthesiologists that prepares them for doing the board exams and the recertification exams. So these scenarios that we created are such that they have to succeed in them in order to get recertified. So they are very complex, very rich, realistic simulations where many things go wrong. And the anesthesiologists actually love it. They really enjoy managing these simulations. I did learn another lesson. It's not good enough to be very good, to be excellent. Our team was excellent. We could not get the contract as a tiny team because we just did not look stable enough. So I teamed with another big company, CAE Healthcare, and we won that contract easily. Excellence and stability. So another lesson, that group had come to us asking if we would join them to submit the contract. Don't be afraid to team. Don't be afraid if they're big. If you're good, you hold your place. I just want to end with some stories that my colleagues gave me when they heard I was going to talk with the WIE group. They say, hey, let us tell you some stories about our experiences. And so these are women who did PhDs in electrical engineering around the time I did, and we have worked together off and on for many years. This one, Sally, she was working as an engineer even before she did her PhD. And she said that she loved her first engineering job. But her boss told her that when they were reviewing the employees, they all agreed she'd done a great job and she deserved a substantial raise. But they were concerned about giving her that raise. I said, why? I said, well, we don't know what you'll spend the money on. We could give this money to a man who's raising a family. That was 50 years ago. And Linda had a story much later. She took over the running of the research group at the first medical imaging company, CMAX, that I was at. And at that time, our research group, it had mostly men, but had quite a few women. And she was looking for a new engineering manager inside the group. And the best person he had, best candidate, was a woman. So she proposed this candidate to her boss. And he looked at her and said, yeah, but don't we have too many women? It is so funny at these, yes, implicit biases. And both these women use these not to get angry, but as an opportunity to maybe educate their peers on, hey, why what they were saying was really ridiculous. So, okay, at this point, I'm doing a lot of different things, and I'm also seeing whether there is another transition for me. But I'm enjoying my life. I'm continuing with my company. I'm volunteering. I'm helping people. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Thank you. And if there's time, I would be happy to take any questions that Dr. Shukole has for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Parvati. This has been simply fascinating. So I'd heard so much about you, but I really didn't get to know all the details and how really, no wonder you are a role model. So Ruchika, do we have questions in the chat box, or do we open up the floor to the attendees?
Ma'am, we have just one question on the chat box.
No, that question, sorry to interrupt, but that question was for the panel discussion, not for this.
Yes. It's not.
Can we go for live interaction, Ruchika? Will that be possible?
Yes.
That will be better. That will be better. Yeah.
So any questions from the audience for Parvati, or comments or clarifications?
I am just an ordinary person.
So Parvati, I have a question for you. It is very interesting to note that in your times, your parents were very, very supportive, and really, the guiding star. And of course, they had realized that you had a great potential. So that's remarkable. And then, of course, you found your passion, you found the thing, the right opportunities and the networking. Now, getting into your own company, which is a big challenge, and that was rather late in the career, if I may say so. That, that's really taking the tiger by the tail. And you were scared earlier when you went into the industry, but when you founded your own company, what were the thoughts that you had? Because women are rather hesitant. I mean, we are seeing startups. We saw Richa earlier in the panel discussion. But even for me, I have had several offers in industry, but somehow I thought academia gave you a lot of freedom in terms of what you can think. But then in industry, you can, build your own products and see the light of the day.
There was a reason why I started my company. At Stanford, we made a lot of wonderful products. We wrote a lot of papers, gave talks, got awards. But our products were really used by the 400 medical students at Stanford. And both the Chinese offer, the Hong Kong offer, to take it out to such a large community. And actually, I worked with Sam Pitroda, who is the father of telecom in India. And he wanted me to take all that we had done, and he was creating the Indian Knowledge Network. And he wanted me make it available across India, my dean would not agree. Oh, we don't know whether Stanford's name might get affected. And I realized that I cannot be at Stanford and do what I want to do next, which is go out to the world. And so when this whole grant thing happened, I thought, okay, it's my opportunity. I'll start this company. And when I left Stanford, the severance was pretty good. So I said, okay, fine, take the whole severance, start this company. And so I didn't even use my own money. I just used that, and we got going. And it did go out to so many people, and I would have liked it to be even bigger. But what we did was really amazing. But that's the reason I left, and I wasn't scared because I was a little angry. I was ready. So that's what happened.
But building the right team is a big challenge. So you have the team ready as well.
That I have been very fortunate in every time. And I think that's part of, it's part of finding a few right people. So, and when someone actually joined a team that didn't click, somehow, maybe it's just the way I did things, but somehow that person left. And the good people stayed. And the good people brought good people. And I was very emphatic about having a very light, open touch so people could be themselves and bring up their ideas and talk. And so those communities that I built at each of these places, I mean, people remember them with love. So I think the atmosphere was very good in every one of these. And in the company that I found, this small company that joined me absolutely matched the way I thought. And so that little Mumbai company grew with us. So yes, we were fortunate to have the right people.
So in the chat box, there's one question that I see. This is from Vedika Kulkarni. The question is, I want to know, Parvati ma'am, I want to know more about your attitude towards a new opportunity that came your way. Sometimes we have multiple paths to choose from. How to go about choosing one?
That is real difficulty, yes. And I have often made the mistake of trying to do too many. It happens. But certain things do require commitment. So, and you can see clearly that if I take this path, I cannot do that. So you do have to look at them. And for me, it was always, what is it that would really excite me? And sometimes I might make more money doing something else or have an easier day. But if it didn't excite me, I could not continue. So it had to be something that really worked for me. And Vedika, that's how I made my choices.
So if there are no more questions, I think Parvati, we got disconnected.
Did I?
No, there you are. Yeah. So if there are no more questions, I think it's time.
Professor
Yes.
Shurkole, I have one question.
Oh, sure. Please, please.
It was a marvelous experience to hearing Parvati ma'am. So my question is that you had a great potential and very brilliant personality. As a woman in that time, you just left India and landed to a unknown place. So at your time, the education of women was not very easy in Indian scenario. Do you think that as you have left India and landed to USA, United States, it helped me to build your career in a bigger way?
Oh, no question. It was the right thing for me. In India, I don't think I would have been so successful. I might have gone into some research position somewhere, but as you know, at that time, it was India just did not have the facilities to really move researchers forward that fast, whereas in the US, it was actually much easier. So absolutely right. That, as Shushmita says, my parents were Farsiing, and they were the ones that sent me on that first step to leave home. And I don't know at this point how my conservative father actually let me go like that, but it worked. It was, you are right. It was moving that gave me my career.
Thank you. Do you think still today it is better to grab the opportunity in United States than in our place?
Oh, I don't think so anymore. I think you have a lot of opportunities. I do not know as well what your opportunities are in the academic research world. I'm not very familiar, but I think in the business world there are many more opportunities. Of course, I think, and again, I've talked from a little bit of ignorance. My impression is that it's easier for men still. But you know, a strong woman is visible. A strong woman will be seen, and you have to make those. You have to take the steps yourself. It might be easier here, but not necessarily as the difference is not as great as it used to be. I believe somebody else would know better than me who has seen both. I have not worked in India.
Thank you very much.
So any other questions? If not, Shudipta?
Yes. Can I ask a question to ma'am? Just
Please.
1 minute, just I will take. Ma'am, just I wanted to ask you that your journey is full of transitions, full of achievements, and yes, we heard from you. But I just wanted to know from you that the journey of life, it comes with success as well as failure. So how to accept that failure gracefully and move forward? I mean, this is the advice that I'm seeking from you for our young engineers or professionals, and for us also. As compared
Please
to you,
say
we are so
how to accept what?
failure,
Failure.
right?
Oh, believe me, I've had failures. I didn't talk about them, but I've had failures. And they are very, very disheartening. They really make me feel very down. And when our lab at Stanford, which I ran for 18 years, when I had to close it down, I really felt that was a failure. We had done so much. It could have gone on to greater heights. But because of various political reasons, it essentially got stifled. And I realized that I, as a leader, had not had the knowledge of what it took to continue it. It was my failure. But the way I accepted that failure was I made sure that everyone in my lab got a good position somewhere else. So everyone was looked after. You know, when you're running a lab and when you're responsible to bring in the money that feeds all those people, it's a huge responsibility. And so I made sure that they all got jobs, good jobs. And that we left on a very positive note. We did not leave. I think there was only one person with whom I left on a rancorous note, and that person was the direct cause of what happened. And he knew it and I knew it. So we just ignored that. But everybody else, all the people I'd worked with, they wished me well and we moved on. So that failure was dealt with as well as it could be. And but the 18 years before that, I think had huge impact on medical education and how we work today, how we teach today. So yes, there was failure, but you have to manage it. There have been other failures. Yeah.
Thank you, Bab. Thank you so much. It's really so motivating.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, all of you.
You really dared to dream.
exactly.
Fortunately, I was able to.
So, thank you, Parvati ma'am, for such a motivational speech. And I'm quite sure that it will inspire many women engineers to complete their future journey, embracing success and fulfillment. So, please accept our heartfelt thanks from the organizing committee of Women in Engineering track under this INDICON 2021.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Shushmita Di, for nicely conducting the session, for the chairing the session so well. Thank you.
Thank you, and wish you all a very successful INDICON. And thank you, ParvatiDev, from the bottom of my heart for accepting this and waking up so early in the morning and giving such a fascinating talk. Thank you.
So thank you.